The arrival of the Invader. It was a clear night on Earth when the first signs of trouble began to appear. The sky, once calm and peaceful, was filled with an eerie glow. At first, no one knew what was happening. People went about their evening routines, not noticing the strange lights in the sky. But as the minutes passed, the lights grew brighter, and the ground beneath their feet began to tremble. Something was coming. Something huge. In space, a massive fleet of alien warships appeared, breaking through the atmosphere like a storm. These ships were not like anything humans had ever seen. They were dark, sleek, and menacing, with sharp edges and glowing symbols that no one could read. Each ship was bigger than the largest skyscraper, and the fleet stretched across the sky like a shadow over the planet. The people on Earth looked up in fear as they realized what was happening. An invasion. Among the invaders was a leader, a woman who was known as Commander Elysia. She was cold and ruthless, the perfect warrior for her people. Her species, the Vorn, had conquered dozens of planets across the galaxy, and Earth was next on their list. She had been chosen for this mission because of her skill, intelligence, and ability to break the will of any species. Her orders were clear. Earth would fall, and humanity would either be destroyed or enslaved. The Vorn never left survivors. Elysia stood in the command center of her flagship, watching the planet below through a massive viewport. The Earth seemed so small from up here, so fragile. It was hard to believe that something so weak could have stood for so long. But she had studied the humans for years, learning about their history, their wars, and their resilience. She knew they were not completely defenseless. But that didn't matter. The Vorn had never lost a war, and she had no doubt that Earth would fall just like every other planet before it. Her fleet descended toward Earth with terrifying speed, prepared to unleash a wave of destruction. But as they approached the atmosphere, something strange happened. Elysia felt a sudden shift in the air, as if the world itself was holding its breath. She couldn't explain it, but something about this planet felt different. It was as if the very ground beneath her was resisting the invasion, fighting back. Elysia shook her head. She had no time for such thoughts. The mission was more important than any strange feeling. The first wave of ships entered the atmosphere, deploying soldiers and weapons. Elysia's mind raced as she gave the command for the attack to begin. The humans would be caught off guard. Their defenses were outdated and weak, compared to the advanced technology of the Vorn. It was supposed to be easy. The cities would fall in hours, and humanity would be crushed under the weight of the invasion. But as the warships descended upon Earth, Elysia's attention was drawn to something unexpected. A small, seemingly insignificant group of humans stood on the ground, armed with only primitive weapons, ready to defend their homes. They were not soldiers or warriors, just ordinary civilians, but their courage was undeniable. They fought with everything they had, facing an enemy they could not comprehend. Elysia's gaze fixed on a woman in the crowd, her eyes filled with determination as she led the charge. The woman was no different from the others, but there was something in her eyes, something that made Elysia pause. This was not what she had expected. Humans were supposed to be afraid, cowering before the might of the Vorn. Yet, here they were, standing their ground, fighting back with a strength that was not physical, but emotional. It was a strength of will, a determination to protect what they loved. Elysia's mind raced. She had studied these humans, but she had never seen this before. Their resistance, their ability to fight with everything they had, was not something she could easily break. It was like they were different, unlike any species she had encountered. And yet, she could not understand why she felt this strange pull towards them. She was here to conquer them, not to admire them. As the battle raged on, Elysia gave orders to continue the attack. The humans were putting up a fierce resistance, but they were no match for the Vorn's advanced weaponry. Still, something in the back of her mind told her that this was not going to be as easy as she had imagined. There was something about humanity that was impossible to ignore, something that made them stronger than she had thought. The battle continued throughout the night, But Elijah found herself distracted. She had always been a woman of logic and reason, but now, for the first time, she found herself questioning her mission. The humans were not what she expected. They were weak, yes, but there was a fire in them, a spark that made her wonder if they were worth saving. Was it possible that they were not the simple creatures she had been taught to think of them as? Was there something more to them, something deeper that she couldn't yet understand? As dawn broke, the invaders' forces began to gain the upper hand. The human resistance was strong, but it was not enough to stop the full force of the Vorn. Elijah stood on the bridge of her ship, watching the destruction unfold below. But in the back of her mind, a question lingered. Was this really what she wanted? She had come here to conquer, to destroy, but something in the humans' fight against all odds made her doubt everything she had known. Something about them had made her stop and wonder, could this be more than just a conquest? Could humanity be more than just a species to be defeated? The first encounter. The sun was setting on Earth, casting a reddish glow over the battlefield. The smoke from the previous day's destruction still lingered in the air, a constant reminder of the devastation the Vorn had unleashed. But as Elijah stood on the bridge of her flagship, she couldn't shake the nagging feeling in the back of her mind. This wasn't what she had expected. The humans had shown resilience, yes, but it wasn't just their resistance that puzzled her. There was something about them, something deep within their spirit, that made them fight not just for survival, but for each other. It had been a quiet day. Her forces had been busy securing the city, taking prisoners and destroying anything that stood in their way. But something kept pulling Elijah away from the mission, pulling her to the ground below. She had seen the human survivors scattered across the streets, their faces full of pain and fear, but also a strange kind of defiance. They weren't running. Not yet. They weren't hiding. Elijah's curiosity got the better of her. Against her better judgment, she ordered her shuttle to land near the center of the city, far away from the main front lines. The humans were too busy dealing with their own losses to notice her arrival. As the shuttle doors opened, she stepped onto the broken streets, her eyes scanning the scene. What she saw stunned her. There, in the middle of the devastation, a group of civilians, just ordinary people, were working together. A man was holding a child in his arms, protecting her from the ruins around them. A woman, covered in dirt and blood, was helping an injured soldier to his feet, refusing to leave his side. The scene was unlike anything Elijah had ever seen in the galaxy. There were no screams of fear, no cries of surrender. Instead, the people of Earth were showing an unshakable bond with each other, an unspoken promise that they would fight until their last breath. The commander had seen countless battles, witnessed the fall of entire civilizations, and in all those conquests, she had never seen anything like this. People who fought, not just for themselves, but for one another. It was something beyond her understanding. Her people, the Vorn, fought alone. They were driven by power, by conquest, by the will to dominate. But these humans, these fragile creatures, were different. They fought together. Elijah's sharp eyes narrowed as she watched the woman helping the soldier. She had never seen such determination in anyone, not even in the toughest of her own soldiers. It was a determination to protect, to save, not to destroy. The woman's face was full of pain, but there was also a fire in her eyes, a fire that refused to be extinguished by the darkness around them. Elijah couldn't tear her gaze away. For a moment, she felt a strange pull in her chest, a feeling she had never experienced before. It was as if she could understand the emotions of the humans around her, something that was completely foreign to her. Her heart raced, her mind scrambling for answers. Why was she so drawn to them? Why did these humans make her feel something that no other species ever had? Just as she was about to step closer, a loud explosion shook the ground beneath her feet. Elijah instinctively moved into a defensive stance, her eyes scanning for threats. The humans, however, didn't run. Instead, they moved quickly to help each other, putting out fires, offering medical assistance, and continuing to fight back against the invasion. There was no fear in their eyes, only the fierce will to survive. In that moment, Elijah realized that these humans, despite their fragile bodies and primitive weapons, possessed something far more powerful than any army. They had hope. They had unity. And that was something she had never encountered in all her years of conquest. She was about to turn and leave, still unsure of what to make of it all, when she noticed the child that the man had been holding. The girl was no more than 6 or 7 years old, but she was looking at Elijah with wide, curious eyes. There was no fear, no trembling in her gaze. The child didn't run or hide. She just stared at the invader, as if she knew Elijah wasn't truly a monster, but something different, something human, if only for a moment. Elijah's breath caught in her throat. The child's gaze held something powerful, an innocence that was almost too pure for this war. Something stirred deep inside her chest. The coldness that had defined her for so long began to melt away, and for the first time, she questioned the reason she had come here. Was this what she was supposed to destroy? Or was there something more to humanity, something worth protecting? Her mission, her orders, had always been clear: conquer Earth and crush its people. But now, standing in the middle of this broken city, surrounded by humans who refused to bow down, Elijah found herself questioning everything. She had conquered many worlds, wiped out countless species, but she had never faced a resistance like this. These humans weren't just fighting for their survival. They were fighting for each other. They were fighting for a future, for a way of life that she couldn't understand but felt drawn to. In that moment, Commander Elijah felt a deep conflict within her. She was a conqueror, trained to destroy, to subjugate. But humanity had shown her something she hadn't expected, something that made her doubt the path she had chosen. Could these humans be the ones to change everything? Could they be more than just a species to be wiped out? A glimpse of compassion. The days following Elijah's first encounter with the humans were chaotic. Her orders were clear: push forward with the invasion, crush all resistance, and break the spirit of the people. But for the first time in her life, the coldness of her mission felt hollow. The images of the humans, united, fighting for each other despite their clear disadvantage, haunted her every time she closed her eyes. Elijah had always prided herself on being a calculated leader, one who never let emotions cloud her judgment. But as the battle for Earth continued, she found herself drawn back to the humans in a way she couldn't explain. There was something about them that made her question her entire existence as a conqueror. It was during one of the quiet nights that the commander made a decision. She would leave her command post. She had always kept a distance from the war's brutality, allowing her soldiers to carry out the attacks. But tonight, she needed to see for herself what the humans were really like. The more she watched from her flagship, the more she felt the need to witness their survival firsthand, to see what drove them to keep fighting despite all odds. She donned a disguise, one that would blend her in with the surrounding humans, and descended to a small village that had been largely untouched by the invasion. As she walked through the streets, she couldn't help but notice the contrast between the city she had seen in chaos and the village before her. There was a stillness in the air, but it was a calm that carried strength. Families rebuilt their homes, shared what little they had, and tended to the injured. No one seemed to care that an alien warship hovered just miles away. Elijah watched a small group of villagers gathering in the town square. At the center of the group stood a man, a leader, no different from the others. He was giving orders, but it wasn't with the stern voice of a soldier. It was with the calm reassurance of someone who understood the weight of responsibility. Elijah couldn't help but listen in on his conversation as he encouraged the people to hold their ground, to protect their homes, and to stay together. "Keep the children safe," he told them, his voice steady and confident. "As long as we stand together, we're stronger than any army." Those words, "we're stronger than any army," echoed in Elijah's mind. She had heard that sentiment before in her countless victories, but never from someone like this, never from a people who had nothing but their resolve. As Elijah moved closer, a child ran up to the man, her small hand clutching a bundle of food. The child looked up at him, her face beaming with pride. "I found more food," she announced. The man smiled down at her, his face filled with tenderness. "Good work, Anna. You're helping everyone." The sight made something stir in Alicia's chest, something warm, something unfamiliar. She had never seen such compassion before. Where she came from, strength was all that mattered. Weakness was a sign of failure. But here, these humans seemed to find strength in caring for each other, in offering help without expectation of anything in return. As she moved through the village, Alicia noticed more acts of kindness. An elderly woman, barely able to stand, was helped by two younger men. A group of farmers worked together to patch up a roof that had been torn apart by the initial attack. And there, in the midst of it all, was the man from the square, taking the time to check on each of his people, offering comfort where it was needed most. For the first time in her life, Alicia felt a deep sense of confusion. The humans were not like the other species she had conquered. They were not just fighting for survival, they were fighting for each other. They cared for the weak, the sick, the elderly. They did not see their fellow humans as expendable resources. They saw them as family. Alicia stood in the shadows, unable to tear her eyes away from the man who was guiding the people. She could feel something tugging at her, a deep longing to understand what these humans had that her people did not. The Vorn were a proud, strong race, driven by survival, by power, by dominance. But what these humans had was something deeper, something far more powerful than strength. It was their unity, their love for each other, that made them resilient. As she continued to watch, she saw the man pause in his duties, his eyes scanning the horizon. He looked tired, worn out from the constant fighting, but there was still a fire in his gaze. Alicia didn't understand why, but for a moment, she felt that fire too. She wanted to walk up to him, to ask him how he did it, how he could keep going when everything was falling apart. But instead, she remained hidden in the shadows, unsure of what to say. In that quiet moment, Alicia's heart raced. It wasn't fear, but something more confusing. Something that made her question the path she had chosen. She had come here to destroy, to conquer. She had come to show the humans their place. But now, she wondered if the true strength wasn't in power or in victory. It was in compassion, in protecting what mattered most. The commander stayed in the village for hours, long after the sun had set. She watched, learned, and absorbed the sense of community that held these people together. They had no advanced weapons, no superior technology, yet they fought in a way she had never seen before. It was as if their very will to survive was fueled by something beyond fear, something that made them unstoppable. And in that moment, Alicia realized something that shook her to her core. This was not a species to be crushed. This was a species that, despite their weaknesses, had something more powerful than any weapon. They had each other. And that was something Alicia didn't know if she could ever defeat. The turning point. The days on Earth grew darker as the invasion raged on. The Vorn forces, relentless in their attack, had slowly begun to claim more ground. Cities fell, resistance fighters were crushed, and Earth seemed on the verge of total annihilation. But through it all, Alicia found herself more and more distant from the cause she had once served so fiercely. Every time she looked down at the human survivors, she saw the same thing. An unyielding will to survive, to fight, and most puzzling of all, to protect one another. Their strength, so different from the cold, calculated power of her own people, was starting to make her question everything. Alicia's commanders were becoming frustrated with her. She had become more distant, reluctant to carry out the orders to destroy entire cities. Each time they reported their victories, she could no longer take pleasure in the destruction. The faces of the humans, their children, their warriors, their leaders, kept flashing before her eyes, and she began to wonder what she was truly doing here. One evening, while standing alone on the balcony of her ship, looking at the fires burning in the distance, she felt the weight of her decision bearing down on her. Her mission was simple: conquer and break humanity. Yet, despite everything she had seen, she wasn't sure she could continue to carry out her orders. The war was far from over, but Elysia's heart had already shifted. She had crossed the point of no return. Her mission had changed, and so had she. The defection. The night air on Earth was colder than she expected, a biting reminder that things were no longer as they had been. Elysia stood silently on the outskirts of a ruined city, her once steady heart racing with an unfamiliar weight. She had made her choice. The plans, the mission, the conquest, all of it now seemed distant, almost irrelevant. The Vorn had always prided themselves on their military might, their ability to conquer any species. But for the first time in her life, Elysia was questioning everything she had been taught. She had come to destroy humanity. Instead, she found herself protecting them. In the shadow of a burned-out building, she activated her communicator and sent a private message to the human resistance leader, the man she had spoken to just days before. Her fingers trembled as she typed, the weight of her decision heavy on her mind. "I need to speak with you, alone." The message was simple, but she knew it would be risky. If her own forces discovered her intentions, it would mean certain death. There was no turning back now. If she was going to defect, it had to be now. She couldn't keep pretending to be the ruthless commander, leading the invasion, while in her heart she had already chosen a different path. Moments later, the man, his name was Samuel, appeared from the shadows. He was the same as she had seen him before, strong, resilient, and unwavering in his determination. But now his expression was cautious, as if he didn't fully trust her. How could he? She had come to Earth with the intent to destroy everything he held dear. Yet here she was, standing before him, no longer an invader, but someone in desperate need of understanding. "You sent the message," Samuel said, his voice guarded. "But why? After everything, why would you come to us?" Elysia's gaze dropped to the ground. "Because I can no longer fight for them." She motioned toward the sky, where the Vorn ships still loomed ominously above Earth. "I don't believe in their mission anymore. I don't believe in their war." Samuel's eyes narrowed, but he didn't take a step back. "And what do you expect from us? You've destroyed our cities, killed our people. Why should we trust you?" Her chest tightened, but she looked him in the eye. "Because I want to help you. I've seen what you're capable of, your strength, your unity. And I can't stand by and watch my people destroy you any longer. If you'll let me, I'll do whatever I can to help." For a long moment, Samuel didn't speak. He studied her carefully, as though weighing every word, every movement. Finally, he spoke, his voice low but resolute. "You say you want to help us, but you've seen the war from both sides. You know what they're capable of. You know what they want. How can we trust someone who's been part of that?" Elysia swallowed hard. The truth was hard to face, but she had to say it. "Because I've seen what they can't see. They don't understand you. They don't understand the bond you share, the way you fight for each other, for something greater than survival. That's why they'll never win. I've watched your people fight, and I've seen the strength in your hearts. I can't destroy that. I can't destroy you." Her words hung in the air between them, the silence broken only by the distant sounds of battle in the night. Samuel seemed to consider her words carefully, his face unreadable. Then, slowly, he nodded. "All right," he said, his voice filled with uncertainty, but also a hint of hope. "We'll take you in, but you'll have to prove that you mean what you say. You'll have to show us that you're not just trying to save yourself." Elysia didn't hesitate. "I'll prove it. I'm done with the war. I'm done with the destruction." In the moments that followed, Elysia knew that her fate had been sealed. She had turned her back on the Vorn. There was no going back. But as she joined Samuel and the human resistance, she felt something she had never felt before, a sense of belonging. She was no longer an invader. She was no longer an enemy. She was part of something greater, something worth fighting for. The next days were a blur of secrecy and quiet movements. Elysia helped the humans, sharing intelligence from the Vorn fleet, giving them insight into strategies and weak points in the alien forces. Every time she did, the guilt in her chest grew heavier. She had once been a part of the machine that threatened to destroy everything she was now working to protect. But each victory, no matter how small, helped ease the weight on her soul. At times, Samuel would glance at her, his eyes filled with a mix of suspicion and curiosity. It wasn't easy for the Resistance to accept her, and it was even harder for Elysia to adjust to this new life. The humans weren't afraid of her, they were cautious. But they didn't reject her. They had seen her actions, her commitment to their cause, and bit by bit, they began to trust her. She had betrayed her own people, but in doing so, she had found something she had never known, a purpose beyond conquest. One night, as they sat in a small, hidden room, planning their next move, Samuel looked at her once more. This time, his eyes were different, warmer, as if he had finally begun to see Elysia not as an invader, but as an ally. "You know, you've already helped us more than you think," he said softly. Elysia smiled, the weight of the world still heavy on her shoulders, but somehow lighter now. "Then I'll do whatever it takes to help you finish this fight." She had made her choice, and now there was only one thing left to do: fight for humanity, side by side with the people she had once come to destroy. She was no longer an enemy. She was a human, at least in spirit, and she would fight until the very end. The final betrayal. The tension was thick in the air, and the cold metal walls of the underground resistance bunker felt like a prison. Elysia, now fully committed to the humans' cause, had been working with them for weeks, feeding them information, sabotaging the Vorn's efforts from within, and helping them prepare for the inevitable final clash. Yet despite all the progress, one thought gnawed at her every day. When would her past catch up with her? She knew it was only a matter of time before the Vorn would realize something was wrong. Her defection had not gone unnoticed. Already, there were whispers among her former comrades, hints of betrayal that had begun to surface like ripples on a calm lake. The Vorn were not a forgiving people, and they would not rest until they found her and made an example out of her. For now, though, Elysia had been able to stay hidden. She was a ghost, moving among the humans, sharing strategies, and helping them organize a counterattack. But she couldn't ignore the clock ticking away. The Vorn would come for her soon. And when they did, there would be no turning back. One night, after an especially intense planning session, she slipped away from the resistance meeting to be alone. The weight of what was coming pressed down on her, and for the first time in weeks, she felt the old fear creeping back in. Her whole life had been built on power, on control. Now she was a fugitive, an alien who had betrayed her own kind. The idea of facing her people again, of confronting the warriors she had once commanded, was enough to make her stomach twist. It wasn't long before Samuel found her in the makeshift kitchen, staring out the cracked window into the night. He knew something was wrong. "You've been quiet," Samuel said, stepping into the dimly lit room. "I can see it in your eyes. You're thinking about what's coming." Elysia didn't turn around. "I know I've made a choice," she said, her voice distant. "But I also know that the Vorn won't stop until they have me. They'll destroy everything to make me pay. And I can't let them do that to you, to your people." Samuel stepped closer, his voice calm but firm. "We're not afraid of them anymore. You've helped us see what we're capable of. We'll stand by you, no matter what happens." Elysia finally turned to face him, her heart heavy. "That's just it, Samuel. You don't understand. The Vorn are relentless. They will burn this planet to the ground, and they will hunt me until there's nothing left. If you stand with me, it will be a death sentence for you. I've already made my choice, but I can't ask you to make it too." His expression softened, but he shook his head. "You're not asking us. You're part of us now, Elysia. We're not going to leave you behind." Elysia looked into his eyes, searching for any hint of doubt, but there was none. Despite the looming danger, despite the threat of annihilation, the humans were willing to stand with her. And that made her heart swell with a fierce pride. pride for the people she had once sought to destroy. But her moment of peace was fleeting. Suddenly, the sound of alarms shattered the quiet night. Alicia's heart skipped a beat. They found me. The Vorn were here. She could feel it in her bones. "Get to the bunker," she ordered, her voice sharp. Now, Samuel didn't hesitate. He was already heading for the door, but before he left, he stopped and looked back at her. "We'll fight together, Alicia. You're not alone." Alicia nodded, but deep down, she knew that the true test was just beginning. As the resistance scrambled to prepare for the attack, Alicia moved swiftly to the communication console. She had no time to waste. She needed to act. She had to buy the humans some time, even if it meant making the ultimate sacrifice. She connected to the Vorn fleet. The cold, harsh voice of her old commander, Crethar, crackled through the comms. "Alicia, we found you. You've betrayed your own people. Surrender now, and we will ensure your death is swift." Alicia's pulse quickened, but she stood tall. This was it. The moment she had known was coming since the day she first stepped onto Earth. "No," she replied, her voice steady. "I won't surrender. I've chosen my side." Crethar laughed, but it was a hollow sound. "You've chosen to die. The Vorn will show no mercy, Alicia. You will regret this. You are a traitor to your kind, and you will be punished for it." Alicia felt the weight of his words, but she didn't flinch. "I've already made my peace. I won't allow you to destroy everything I've fought for, everything I've learned." The transmission cut off abruptly, and Alicia knew it was time to act. She stood, her resolve hardening like steel. She had betrayed the Vorn, but in doing so, she had found something far greater. A purpose, a sense of belonging. She would not let the Vorn take that from her. With a final glance at the humans, her people now, Alicia initiated the self-destruct sequence on the Vorn's nearest warship, the one that had been positioned to attack the bunker. It was a risky move, but it was the only way to stop them from launching a full-scale assault. She knew the explosion would destroy the ship and much of the surrounding fleet, but it would also buy the humans precious time. As she typed in the final command, she didn't feel fear. She felt a strange calm, as if she had finally found her place in the world. The countdown began. For Alicia, this was the final betrayal. But it was also the final act of defiance. A defiance against the empire that had once been her home, and a defiance for the people who had shown her the meaning of true strength. The Vorn would come for her, but she would face them as a human, fighting for humanity's future. The war wasn't over yet, but Alicia knew she had already made the greatest sacrifice. Her loyalty to the Vorn, her very identity, and her life. And in the end, that was enough. A new beginning. The explosion rocked the night sky, a brilliant flash of light followed by a deep, thunderous rumble that reverberated across the battlefield. Alicia's hand trembled as she watched the Vorn flagship crumble in the distance, a firestorm of metal and flame consuming it. The blast was only the beginning of the chaos that would unfold. But in the moments after the explosion, a strange quiet settled over her. The Vorn were weakened, but the humans were still at war, still fighting to reclaim their world. Alicia knew the battle wasn't over. But as she looked around, she saw the humans, the survivors, her people now, gathering their strength, ready to continue. They had witnessed her final act of defiance, the destruction of the fleet that had loomed over them, and in that act, they had seen something else: hope. The resistance, once fragmented and weak, had become a force to be reckoned with. They had witnessed the fall of their enemies, and in the ashes, they found a new sense of unity. Alicia had done what no one else could. She had weakened the Vorn in a way that no weapon could. The remaining alien ships were scattered, their leadership in disarray, and the humans, armed with the knowledge Alicia had shared, were prepared to strike back. But none of this would have been possible without her. She had given them the tools, the strategy, and most importantly, the belief that victory was possible. And in return, they had given her something she had never thought she would find: a place to belong. She walked among them now, no longer a conqueror, no longer an enemy. She was one of them. Her skin still bore the marks of her past, the scars of the life she had left behind. But with each passing day, they felt less like reminders of the invader she had once been. They felt like the marks of someone who had fought for a better future, for the future of humanity. Samuel approached her as she stood looking out at the horizon. His face was streaked with dirt and sweat, but there was a spark in his eyes, a spark of something that had always been there, but now it shone brighter than ever. "You did it," he said quietly. "We did it." Elysia turned to him, her heart swelling. "No, you did it. You were always the strength. I was just the one who helped light the way." Samuel shook his head, a half-smile tugging at his lips. "You didn't just help us. You gave us a chance. You showed us that we could win. That's something no one else could do." For a long moment, they simply stood together, watching the sun rise over the ravaged city. The world was still scared from the invasion, but it was alive. The humans had survived, and they would rebuild. Elysia knew that her journey had only just begun. The Vorn were far from defeated, but they had been weakened, and the resistance, now stronger than ever, was ready to face whatever came next. She was ready too. But there was something else now, something deeper than the desire for victory. Elysia had found a new purpose, a new identity. She was no longer the commander of an invading force. She was no longer the weapon that had been wielded against Earth. She was someone who had fought for something worth protecting, and in doing so, she had found her place among those she had once sought to destroy. The war would continue, but Elysia was no longer afraid. She had already faced her greatest challenge, betraying her past, her people, and come out the other side stronger for it. There would be losses, yes. There would be battles fought, and some would not survive. But there would also be victories, and with each victory, humanity would grow stronger. She smiled at Samuel, a sense of peace settling over her. "Let's go. There's still work to be done." Together, they turned toward the future. The sun was rising on a new world, one that was no longer defined by fear, destruction, and conquest. It was a world where humanity had not only survived, it had triumphed. And Elysia, once an enemy of that world, now stood at the heart of its future. She was no longer an invader. She was part of something greater. She was home. And as the first light of dawn touched the earth, Elysia knew that this was just the beginning of the story. The humans had won this fight, but the real battle, for their future, was only just starting. And she would be there, every step of the way, as they fought not just for survival, but for something far more precious, a future worth living for.